Welcome back, everybody. I hope you're all doing really well. I want to look at some tips and tricks for using a tube amp and a load box in a quiet or silent recording setup. I'm sure a lot of you are in a similar situation where you're spending all of your time at home and you don't really have the means to crank up your favorite tube head. So the things you'll need for this video are a guitar. I've got my PRS McCarty with some Fishman Fluence Classic pickups in it. I've got my Cherrytone Molecular amplifier. I've got a Fractal X load, which is a reactive load. Using a reactive load is the way to go in this situation because it will mimic the impedance response of a head connected to a real speaker cabinet. Then I'm going into my interface, which is a Universal Audio Apollo Twin, and I have 2Notes Torpedo Wall of Sound loaded up. 2Notes have released a free license for this that anybody can get. I'm in no way affiliated with them. I just saw that it was free, and I like free stuff, and you guys can go and get the same thing. So if you just kind of hook up your amp to the load box and don't have some kind of cabinet simulation, you get this. Yeah, and a lot of people go, that doesn't sound like my amp. Technically, I guess it does because that's what your amp output sounds like, but normally we hear it through a cabinet. Or if we're recording, we normally mic that cabinet up, so we hear it through a cabinet and a microphone. And if you engage wall of sound with a cabinet impulse, it sounds a bit better now. So probably the most important thing here is getting the IR selection right. Wall of sound is really cool because you can select different cabs and change the microphone up. For example, I could try a ribbon 160 instead of a 57. I could go through all of that stuff. I could move it around in kind of real space, which is kind of cool. I can blend different microphones. If you just want to use the stock cabs, I normally just like grabbing a 57, moving it slightly off center, and then grabbing a 121 and leaving it straight on center, kind of blending in the 121, maybe 9 dB quieter. And this kind of sounds like rock and roll. Very, very cool. And there is kind of a feedback process here between the IR selection and then your amp, which has knobs and controls, and you should use those to, once you've kind of selected a cabinet, dial in your tone. I'm going to use a user cab though, because I have shot some of my own cabs. This one I'm particularly fond of. This is the main cab that I use to record with. I'm going to put a link to this in the video description so you guys can get it for free. This is what it sounds like. I'm going to use it on its own. I'll just bring the volume up over here a little bit. You can also blend this with the 2Notes impulses, but I'm just going to use this one. And again, that feedback process to me sounds like I could use maybe some more mids and a little less high end, maybe a little less bass as well. Let's do that. This stuff is all totally to taste. Keep that in mind. All right, the next thing you want to do once you've got your IR selected and once you've twiddled some knobs on your amp, before we do anything else, is to twiddle the master volume knob on your amp because this is so important. It's such a huge factor in the tone. If I turn the master down on this and I compensate by turning the level on the load box up, this is the tone I get. Whereas if I kind of do the opposite and I really crank the master, this is one nice thing about having a load box. You know, in the real world, when you've got an amp in a room, you probably rarely get the master past about like 9 o'clock. If I really crank the master and compensate with the DI level. In this case, the amp kind of, you start to get a little bit of power amp saturation and some compression and a little bit of sag and feels so good. You probably never get the chance to do that with your amp if it's over like 10 watts in a room. So playing around with the master volume control and getting that, I find is such an important thing for the feel and response. And it can kind of do some overall smoothing and things like that, which is really cool. Then we want to move on and do a little bit of post EQ because, you know, when's the last time you put your speaker right up to the your speaker, your ear up to the speaker of like a raging Marshall stack. Don't do this. Don't ever do this. You'll damage your hearing, and you can't undo that damage. But the point is that like that's kind of what happens when you close mic a guitar cab. It's not going to sound like an amp in the room, and microphones generally have a different frequency response to the human ear. So we probably need to cut out a bunch of low end and cut out a bunch of high end in post. So let's engage this EQ. I've set it to be parametric. I normally set the low cut or the high pass at about 80 hertz, and I'll set the low pass or the high cut at about 8 kilohertz. And I find this kind of does a trick to just kind of take out the excess boom and the excess fizz. Very, very nice indeed. You can take that one step further, and there's a plugin that I really like to use that is also free called TDR Nova, and Nova is a dynamic EQ, so you can do some kind of fine-tuning stuff with this, especially if you like the chugga stuff. I always find, you know, somewhere around like about 160 hertz with a kind of medium Q if you do this and engage the threshold. So now you're going to get a dynamic EQ. What you can do is use this to kind of tame any excess low end on palm muting chugs. That's kind of cool. You could also, do some, you can get really nerdy with this, and we could use, there's normally somewhere between like 3 and 5K, some really harsh frequencies that you can, I call them the ice pick frequencies. You set a really high Q with your EQ and use this band solo function and just sweep that until you hear some really nasty stuff. Ooh. So around, where was it, about 3.7, that's particularly gross. Let's cut out some of that using a really high Q. And similar kind of thing, we use band 4, I think it was about 6K or something like that, maybe a little less. And we'll just pull a bit of that out as well. So those harsh frequencies, which can really build up and give you ear fatigue, you know, we don't want those. So what we've got now, pull out about 3 dB as well. If I bypass this, kind of smooths everything out. And again, you can now go back to your amp, and if you want more high end, add some more treble, do that. If you want less high end, if you want more or less of anything, use the knobs on your amp. So that's with the master volume raging, and it's quite saggy. Of course, if you wanted it a little bit tighter, turn the master down. A lot of kind of modern metal tones are mostly preamp distortion. There's not actually a lot of kind of like power amp coloration going on in there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, if you really wanted to, if you wanted kind of like a room simulation, you could do this in Wall of Sound, or you can use a room reverb. The reverb in Wall of Sound isn't too bad, actually. I like Studio A at about 10%, so just a touch, kind of takes a bit of the edge off that direct tone. So, they're the things that I normally do when I'm recording with a load box. Very, very minimal things in reverse order. A little bit of room simulation from a reverb, a little bit of dynamic EQ, a little bit of kind of high and low cut, finding the right IR, which is super important, and twisting some knobs and playing some guitar and having some fun. That is the most important thing at the moment. And obviously, choosing a load box that is going to be powerful enough for your amplifier. My amp's rated at 50 watts, and this is a 100 watt load box, so it's totally fine. I can crank it all the way. I can get it into that gooey, saggy brown zone, and it's all good. If you guys enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments. If you have any further questions, let me know. Again, Torpedo Wall of Sound, you can go to the 2Notes website and get a license for that for free with 2 free cabs. And TDR Nova, similarly, free plugin. All you need is the hardware, which I'm sure a lot of you already have. Thanks for watching the video. I will see you guys next time.